Yes, that's right. I'm no longer using my Broadfork anymore, but there's a lot more to that story on this episode of Nature's Always Right. So you may be saying to yourself, Steven, what the heck? You told me the Broadfork was good for soil health. I thought I should use it. Well, you're right. You're still right. But there's some more things to consider. So the main reason that I'm no longer Broadforking on this plot is because the soil health is so good that now the compaction layers have moved much farther down, the clay layers have moved down, and now when I put my Broadfork in, it slips down super easily without any effort. So what this shows me is that I've raised my organic matter, the drainage is really good, there's just better soil aggregates that are allowing more oxygen transfer and overall just a better soil texture. So basically I've switched this plot over to be just like my other plot, completely no dig other than taking out the crop, and that's it. So I'm going to show you a couple different versions of my soil right now. My landlords recently cleared this out and they planted some fruit trees, so they've been walking everywhere here compacting it. So let's take a look at this. It also did rain last night, so that's also making the ground a little bit softer and easier to Broadfork, but let's just rip it apart here and take a peek. Because it rained yesterday, it's going to be a little bit more tricky to see. I hope you guys are able to see that the bottom of my hole here, the dirt is much more clay, so that's where the clay layer is now. You can see how much clay is in this. See how it doesn't break apart. But now if I grab something from the topsoil here, which is now almost 10 inches deep, it was not like that when I started here. Now these are some of the things that I want to prove on my next farm, because I'm going to document all of this stuff all the way through from the beginning. So now let's just take some of that, the really good stuff at the top. So as you can see here, much different soil. If I squeeze it together and I throw it, it's going to break apart. That's good. Massage the soil, it's breaking up into these little smaller balls, or called aggregates. It just shows you that the soil quality is very good. So if we dug up my veggie beds, we'd see something very similar. Now let's go over here and we're going to take a look at some beds that I started the same way as my secondary plot, where it was just cardboard and then a ton of really good compost. Let's see how those beds look. Those beds are like 2 years old, I think. So this area had a lot more fertility and stuff done to it than over there. That was basically just compost and a little bit of foliar spraying. All right, you guys, this is awesome. This is such a great example. So now what you're seeing here, this is the soil that I've brought in. This is what was here beforehand. When I look on Google Earth, I can tell that there was a little carport here. So they're parking cars here. They brought in a bunch of sand and gravel. And then at the bottom is our clay layer, which is about the same distance down actually as out there. The big difference that you can see is in my main market plot, this doesn't exist. It's this all the way down to the clay. Before, when I would open up the dirt, there was a lot more clay mixed into all of this area. So it would be a lot more sticky. You know, the clay, because of its electrical charge, attracts the particles and it sticks together, and that's why it's such a sticky soil. So I'd even recommend every year digging a hole like this in one of your beds and taking a picture and watch that soil development change over time, and watch this really good layer move over time. And if you're doing this for profit, it's even a great idea to soil test every year, and especially if you're using regenerative techniques, because we want to show as much evidence as possible of what we're doing is insanely successful. And the more evidence we have going into the future, the better we can support regenerative ag, and they can't poo-poo it and say that chemical ag is superior. And by soil testing, you're going to be able to see if you're deficient in anything, and maybe, depending on the soil test you do, you can see your organic matter. You can even see microbial content, fungal content. There's a lot of different cool tests you can do to see how your soil is improving, and then how you might want to adjust it with different microbial inputs, fungal inputs, or maybe even just direct feeding organic nutrients in the form of fertilizer. So how was I able to get my soil to this level of quality within 3 years so now I don't feel like I have to Broadfork anymore? Well, there's been a lot of different things that I've done here. Of course, nature's always right, and I've done everything trying to mimic nature to the best of my ability and using completely naturally derived nutrients such as compost, aerated teas, kelp, azomite rock dust, things like that. I'll be posting the links to these videos I'm speaking about down in the description or right up here for you guys so you guys can check that out. But in the beginning of this farm, when the soil was here, it was very clay, very rocky, just like most of San Diego soil is. The first thing that I did is I brought in a sheet mulch, which is a layer of cardboard or carbon. I added some straw in there as well. Put about an inch layer of really good organic compost from a local supplier and seeded my cover crop directly into that. I let that grow for about 5 months. I knocked it down, tarped it, let the soil microbes eat as much of the biomass as they wanted, let it go into the ground, and then I prepared my beds. So you can see that in a video. Beyond that, the first year I was spraying aerated worm and compost teas almost weekly. Foliar spraying my entire crop. And if you don't know, when you foliar feed, especially if you're able to make or obtain a really quality aerated tea, when they're sprayed foliarly, they'll actually produce exudates from their roots. And if you're not familiar with soil biology, an exudate is a carbohydrate that a plant produces from its roots in order to feed soil microbes. And basically there's a free marketplace going on underneath the soil where the plant is asking for certain nutrients. The microbes and fungi work together to break it down and transport it to the root zone, and then they are given the exudate in exchange. So just like us, trying to sell products and services up here, it's very, very similar. The last 2 years, I started incorporating biochar, which is another great soil amendment. Biochar is charcoal that has been activated, meaning it will now adsorb. And adsorb, basically it means that the molecules will stick into the pores of the charcoal, and charcoal's an incredible thing. In 1 gram of charcoal, there's about a football field of square space. So it is an amazing home for microbes and fungi, and even nutrients can be stuck there because of the adsorption. So biochar is an excellent amendment for soils that are depleted or damaged, have low organic matter. You get your soil test back and it's low in nutrients. This is a great way to inoculate biology and introduce more nutrients in a long-term way into the soil. Beyond that, I added Korean natural farming in the last year. And Korean natural farming is a whole nother organics growing method where you're incorporating indigenous microorganisms, creating fermented plant juices, all sorts of different inputs. Like you can make your own water-soluble calcium phosphate. Basically, every nutrient and microbe you need, it can be created using this system. So I started doing that as well. And through all these different biological methods, I eventually ended up with very good soil. So those are some of the ways that I have introduced biology and nutrients into my soil and allowing them to do the work for me. The microbes are the ones feeding the plants. The microbes are the one changing the soil structure, not me with a tiller and trying to change the pH or trying to all these different things. The microbes balance the pH. The microbes balance the nutrients. The microbes do everything. So that's why this biology concept is so important to the future of farming and where everything's going now that we understand what's going on in the soil. If you want to learn some more about broadforking versus no-dig, Charles Dowding style versus tilling, I did another video that you can see here that's all about the soil biology concepts behind each of those different methods. So definitely check that out after watching this video, because I think it'll put this whole piece of the puzzle together for you so you can understand it better. So the next big thing that made me realize I don't need to broadfork anymore is how I started my secondary plot down the road. And if you've seen the video of how I set up my plot, I did it completely no-till, no-dig from day one, but it's a little more expensive. When I started this plot here that I'm standing on, I did the cover crop and all that stuff. the teas, because that's a really cheap way to increase the biology or organic matter. But a more business savvy way that would take a lot less labor time, and it's actually cheaper just to buy in the compost. So from a business standpoint, as a market gardener, I think it's much smarter to bring in your own compost, and like I did at my other plot, make a really deep bed, and you're off to the races, and you can just grow and grow and grow in that really high quality compost. It has to be high quality compost. So although the methods that I used on this home plot worked and were very good at getting the soil better, it takes a much longer time, and I was okay with sacrificing that time because I wanted to make videos about this. I wanted to experiment with these techniques to prove that it is possible to improve your soil. Now, I will say, I still love the Broadfork. It's still a fantastic tool when used in the correct ways. There still may be a time that I want a Broadfork on this property, even though my soil is so good. So if you get a lot of rain, that's going to cause compaction just from the falling water, the soaking of the water, just more weight, and it just causes compaction over time. So in poorer soils with less organic matter, that's going to be more of an issue, this compaction problem. If your organic matter is amazing, like 10% or more, you're probably not going to have this issue, depending on the soil structure. Everything's a little different, right? So that's why context really, really matters. Now, the other reason you might want to use a Broadfork is if you're going to grow something that really penetrates down into the ground, like a carrot, and you want to make sure that you have really long, straight, nice carrots, and maybe the bed, you feel like it's a little bit too compact. You'd like to open it just a little bit. In that case, that would make sense again. So it's not like you get rid of the Broadfork forever. There may be another instance where you want to bring it out and use it again, but over time, and if you're doing the right techniques, about 3 years, that's like the golden year for me, at least, when I saw my farm really flourish to the fullest extent, business-wise and crop-wise, and soil-wise. I think it can be done even faster, honestly, but that's what I'll be showing you guys on my Tennessee property in the future. And then also remember to use the proper Broadforking technique, because Broadforking is soil disturbance, right? You're cracking the soil, you are breaking apart things, maybe you killed an earthworm or whatever, but it's very minimal disturbance. So just make sure you're using the correct cracking technique. Don't go overboard. I have a video about the correct technique to not do over disturbance. Now, one other big reason I stopped Broadforking is it's more labor. And as much as I love getting a workout from my Broadfork, I also like doing less work. So that is why I'm a big believer in using the Broadfork and more soil disturbance techniques up front at the start of your farm, if you're going to use them. And then you slowly back off of them over time as your soil structure improves.